Hello there guys, and welcome to another one of my reviews. Today we are going to dissect the brand new Volvo XC40 Recharge. For some of you, brand new might sound like a contradictory term because the XC40 has been in production for quite some time now. However, Volvo decided to make it a fully electric ordeal last year. And that was a bit surprising because this car was initially offered with regular internal combustion engines at first, then a plug-in hybrid version was introduced, and now we're looking at Volvo's first electric car, because that's what this is. Now I know some people will mention the Polestar alternative, but in all fairness, technically, I know what you mean, but technically Polestar is now a completely different brand. So if you're looking for an electric car with the Volvo badge on it, this is the first one that can satisfy your needs. So what are we looking at over here? We're looking at a car that was basically transformed into an electric offering, because from the get-go this wasn't designed to be an electric car, but times are changing and they're changing fast, so Volvo had to adapt and they had to improvise to some extent, and this is their first offering. It's available with a front-wheel drive setup or with an all-wheel drive setup with one electric motor or two electric motors, but the one we have here is the twin engine version, which means we have two electric motors. It is the range topping version. In terms of design, well, not a lot has changed compared to a regular XC40. As a matter of fact, they look exactly the same with one, or maybe I should say two exceptions. The first one is right up front over here, where we have a different grille. Now the regular XC40 grille has slats in it in order to cool off the engine under the hood. This one doesn't, because it has to be as aerodynamic as possible, and it doesn't really need air under the hood, because under the hood we no longer have an internal combustion engine. What we have over here is a storage space and an electric motor. The storage space, the frunk, as we like to call it in the industry, is rather small, only 31 liters, but it should allow you to store some stuff over there. I don't know, maybe stuff you don't really use, because opening the hood and getting to them is a bit trickier. Other than that, we also have the Thor's hammer design for the headlamps, and everything is rather clean cut and elegant. And from the sides, it's the same story. Our car over here has a dual paint job. We have a black roof and white, crystal snow white, something like that, body. I like the fact that the doors are opening really wide and they cover the door sills, so you won't get dirty once you get in or out of the car. It's the same story in the back as well. Now the second difference compared to a regular XC40 is the fact that we have a cover or a port over here, because on the regular petrol-powered version you have one on the right side, but on the electric models you have it on the left side. But that's a detail few people will ever notice. Since we're talking about the sides, I'll also mention the wheels. These are 19-inch wheels, diamond cut wheels, and they look really good. What's interesting about this car is the fact that we have staggered tires on it. So the front ones are 235 wide and the rear ones are 255 wide, and that's because of the massive power levels this car has. I know it doesn't show it, but believe me, it's really powerful and really fast. But we're going to talk about that later on. Around the back, we have the traditional stoplights over here, traditional Volvo lights, nothing extraordinary. And we have a 452-liter boot, which has a modular floor, if you will, that allows you to store stuff under the floor and hook your grocery bags too. It's quite an interesting take. Once you get inside the Volvo XC40, you notice a very familiar layout. Basically, this interior looks like just about any other interior in the current Volvo range. What's different is the set of materials used for the interior, as well as some of the solutions they chose for the audio system. For starters, the materials feel really good on the top half of the car. So from the center console upwards, we have vegan leather on the seats, we have Alcantara coverings on the center of the seats, we have soft touch plastic on the dashboard, we have a material on the top side of the door panels that replicates the leather feel, but it's not leather. Good quality plastics on the top half, but less than perfect plastics on the lower half of the door panel. Also, they created a very interesting approach because they removed the speakers from the door panels and they included them into the dashboard, and this creates a lot more storage room in the door pockets. And this is one of the cars with the biggest door pockets I've ever seen. And we have plenty of storage spaces as well. We have one over here, along with a charging pad, 2 cup holders, another rather large storage space over here in the center armrest, and a trash bin for your trash. The audio system has been embedded in the dashboard. As I said, it's a Harman Kardon solution on this car, but it's not really that great. I think it lacks depth, and the higher frequency sounds are not really well replicated, as well as the lower frequency ones. I don't know, maybe I'm just too used to having the subwoofers under the seat and feeling the sound different. Another novelty is the infotainment system. This is using the Google Android solution. So basically you have an Android tablet over here. It works really well. It's very simplified compared to the previous solution, and once you connect it to the internet, it does a lot of stuff. Volvo says it's offering its customers internet on board of its cars. You have a SIM card on board that can be connected to various networks, and basically you can install all the apps you could otherwise install on your Android phone. But for now it lacks Android Auto support and Apple CarPlay support. So if you're an iPhone user, you might have a couple of issues over here, but you can set up a Google account, you can associate it to the car, and you won't have any issues whatsoever. And you can add apps like Waze, Google Maps, or Spotify directly into the car, so you don't have to stream them from your phone. So it works really good. There are some nibbles with it. I mean, in order to get to certain functions, you have to go through certain submenus. I would have preferred a easier solution, but I think that's going to get solved in the future. But overall, I didn't have any issues with it. We have a digital instrument cluster as well, 12.3 inches. It's really minimalistic. It only shows relevant information, and in the middle you can have the Google Maps shown right in the middle of the instrument cluster to know where you're going at all times. So everything has been reduced to the bare minimum, and that seems to be the trend in the industry. Let's see how we fit in the back. The back seats of the XC40 are surprisingly large. Now, I fit in here, and I didn't expect that. Even though we only have a wheelbase of 2.7 meters, this car has been well packaged by Volvo, and I fit in the back, sitting behind a potential driver with my exact same specs. I'm 6 feet tall and about 250 pounds. This seat is adjusted in my comfortable driving position, and as you can see, I fit over here in the back, which is surprising to me. We have the same mix of materials over here. The car feels airy, especially because of this panoramic sunroof. Yes, I do touch the headliner just a tiny bit, but that's okay. I didn't really expect to fit that well in the back of this car, and I think I could travel for longer trips easily sitting over here in the back. Theoretically, we have 5 seats in this car, but we do have a massive tunnel over here, transmission tunnel, even though there's no transmission going on over here, and I'm going to explain that just a bit later on. But theoretically, you could travel with 4 adults over here. I wouldn't recommend sticking 3 adults in the back. Now, let's get behind the wheel and see how this car drives. 2 things will surprise you the moment you get behind the wheel of the XC40 Recharge, or at least they surprised me. The first one was the starting sequence, because this car doesn't have a start button. Normally you would find it over here, but since this is an electric car, Volvo thought maybe we should do something special with it, and they did. What they did was they created a different starting sequence. Basically, all you have to do is get in the car, sit on the driver's seat, press on the brake pedal, and the car will start up automatically. However, it only turns on the accessories, so you don't really know if the car is on or not. But you do get a signal in the instrument cluster telling you to put it in drive or reverse in order to set off. I didn't notice it at first, and I was looking around the cabin for about 5 minutes strong before I figured out what's happening. That's the first thing. I mean, we've seen that on other cars as well. We've seen it on Volkswagen's models, on the ID3 and ID4 and the ENIAC and so on. And I don't really like it. The main difference between this system and the one on the Volkswagen Group's alternative is the fact that on those cars, you also have a start button. You don't have one over here. So that's the only way you can start up the car, but that's fine. Don't worry about it. Then the second thing you'll notice is that the brake feel is quite interesting. It's a really hard brake pedal, and it has a really short travel. So basically, you have to get used to it at first. You have to be really careful with the brake pedal, especially over the first couple of miles, to get a feel of the car. Normally, you don't really use the brake pedal because this car has regenerative braking. But once you do, you notice that just how hard it is. And since I mentioned the regenerative braking, let's talk about the specs of the car. You get two choices in the XC40 Recharge range. The first one is a front-wheel drive model. As I said, this car is based on the same platform as the regular XC40. It has only been adapted. Basically, you get a front-wheel drive electric motor with up to 231 horsepower, or you can get an all-wheel drive version that has an electric motor on the front wheels and one on the rear axle. And that version is the one we're driving today. It can deliver up to 408 horsepower and 660 Newton meters of torque. This makes the Volvo XC40, this tiny little crossover, one of the most powerful cars Volvo has ever made. And it's incredibly fast, and you get an amazing throttle response. You can do 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 4.9 seconds, and the car feels absolutely brutal when you floor it at any kind of speed, and that's absolutely amazing. I love the way this car accelerates, but I couldn't say the same about the overall driving experience. I can't say I love the way this car drives, because since this is a converted internal combustion platform, you do get some hiccups, like I said in many other reviews with this sort of conversion. The first thing you notice is the suspension. Now, since this car was created for a much lighter weight in general, the suspension had to be stiffened up in order to sustain the extra 500 kilos of batteries hidden in the floor. So you feel that everywhere. It is a busy ride, especially over uneven and not perfect surfaces. I guess if you drive in Sweden where the roads are perfect, that would be fine. But in other places, the suspension feels kind of busy over rough patches of roads. Luckily, it's not noisy though. So even though it's busy and you can feel it working, the suspension doesn't send a lot of noise in the cabin. As a matter of fact, this is a very quiet cabin, and the engineers did their best in order to muffle every single sound they could. Even though you have so much power, you can't really drive this car like a hot hatch in the bends. That's because it will lean quite a lot. You don't have adaptive dampers on this car, so the setup had to be done in such a way that it would withstand all sorts of driving scenarios. So they couldn't stiffen it up too much in order to make sure this car holds its weight rather well in a tight corner at high speed. So it will lean a bit, it will understeer a bit, but if you accelerate right at the apex, I noticed that the rear axle has a tendency to step out, and that's really interesting. But overall, the weight isn't kept in check perfectly. But I don't think Volvo wanted to create a racer over here. I don't think Volvo wanted to create a sports car. They know their demographic really well, and they created a car that's refined to some extent. It's quiet, it's luxurious, and it's plenty fast in a straight line. For most of its customers, that will be enough. That's what happens when you know your demographic, and that's what Volvo did. And I think this car will be bought by people in bulk, but I think most of them will go for the 231 horsepower version, because I think that's enough for most situations. You don't really need 400 horsepower for daily driving around town. And the battery will remain the same no matter which car you go for, so you get a longer range on the 231 horsepower version. Now let's talk about the battery for a moment. It's a 75 kilowatt hour unit stored in the floor. Theoretically, according to the WLTP testing cycle, it should deliver 400 kilometers of range. My real life tests showed closer to 300. I did drive it during winter time. The temperatures were closer to 10 degrees Celsius, so decently cold, but not too cold. And the car is riding on winter tires, so that definitely took a toll on the end result. So around town, I got about 300 kilometers of range. On the highway, 250, and on a series of B roads, 320 kilometers of range. So that's decent. I think we didn't lose quite a lot of the estimated range as it happened with other cars and some of its rivals, some of the rivals of this car. As for charging, you can recharge this car at a maximum power of 150 kilowatts if you can find one such charging station, because they are pretty rare. But if you do find one, you will recharge this car in about 30 minutes, up to 80%. So that's really good. So overall, I really enjoyed this car. I would talk about the pricing, but it varies depending on the country you're in. The two main rivals this car has are the Mercedes-Benz EQA and the Audi Q4 e-tron. So choosing between them will be rather tricky, because the e-tron is the only one that's actually built on a dedicated electric platform. This one and EQA have been set up on internal combustion platforms that have been adapted to work with an electric drivetrain. So they both have some hiccups to overcome. Overall though, I liked this car most, and this is the most powerful you can get in this triad, because the other two tap out at about 300 horsepower. So this is the most powerful version you can get in this segment compared to its two main rivals. Overall, I think I would pick this one, but I would like to know which one would you pick. So let me know in the comment section below. I am more than happy to talk with you guys and answer any additional questions you might have. Until next time, don't forget to like, share, and of course subscribe, and don't forget to feed your passions. Ciao.